So today we're going to be making some pep pot. What you need is a pot that's heat and scratch resistant. Heat is at the highest setting. Don't add any oil, and then add your meat once it's hot. So I'm using beef, but I didn't thaw it out, so this is what we have, and it should sound something like this. What we're trying to do is dry roast the meat, so you need to get it really, really hot. Add about 2 tablespoons of brown sugar and keep it at the highest heat that you have. Just make sure that you're continuing to stir because we want the meat to brown. We don't want it to burn. And the reason we don't add oil is because I'm using beef, and beef produces a lot of oil. So all that you're seeing at the bottom there came out of the beef. Make sure that you keep stirring and then turn the heat down to medium-high and then add your seasoning. Whichever seasoning you're using, I think mine is just garlic, thyme, and some pepper. You have to add enough seasoning just because you're not just seasoning the meat, you're also seasoning the broth that's going to be with the meat. Add a little bit of casrip and just keep stirring. Because you want the meat to cook a little bit with the casrip, the seasoning, and the brown sugar before you add the water. Add a teaspoon of aji or MSG and about 1.5 tablespoons of salt, as well as some black pepper, and just make sure that you give it a good stir. So you don't want it to burn, you want it to fry, but you don't want it to burn. And the reason you put the meat in before you put anything else into the pot is because you want the meat to dry roast. And you can see that it's frying properly if you add it at the same time as the casserole. So now you add enough water to cover the meat, and then you're going to add some cinnamon. About 2 sticks should be fine. I usually keep the pieces that are too short to grate, and that's what I'm using. About 6 or 7 cloves. At this point, you need to taste for salt before you add any more sugar. I usually like my pep pot a bit sweet, so this is me adding another 2 tablespoons of sugar. Some more casrip because you want the broth to be dark enough. But remember, this is going to cook down, so don't add too much. Give it a good stir, and then you leave it boiling at medium-high heat. At this point, you can add the peppers. So use 1 or 2 whole peppers or ground pepper if you got some. And then you can add some shallots. So I'm using about that much. Give it a good stir, and then you can leave it for, I think I left this for about an hour on medium-high. Just remember to check it and give it a stir every now and then, because you want most of the liquid to evaporate, but you don't want all of it to go. So it should look something like this. At this point, you can taste for salt, and you can add a bit more if you want, or a bit more sugar. I'm adding a bit more salt and a bit more sugar. I'm adding a bit more casrip because I want it just a bit darker, and I'm going to be adding some water, and I'll tell you why in a second. But just make sure that you give it a good stir. And at this point, it's mostly finished cooking. You just add the water, and then you turn it off and leave it for the night. And it's very important that you boil it up every morning and every night, regardless of whether or not you actually eaten some right then. Because I don't want y'all to forget to boil it up and then come back and tell me how I gave y'all shit in. So please remember, please set an alarm. You don't store it in the fridge, you store it right on the stove. And that's why you need to reheat it every morning and every night. And the reason I told you to add some water is because beef is really fatty, and the fat usually sleeps at the top, as it cools. So this way it's easier to scoop it out, which I usually do because, nah, that's too much. At this point, you can taste again for salt, see if it needs anything else. I usually add just a little bit more casrip, but just remember that the liquid's going to boil down, so don't add too much. So the same thing as the day before, you just boil it down enough that there's enough liquid inside, because you don't want too much and you don't want too little, depending on your preference. And you don't need to keep adding water every night, just because I do it the first night just to get the fat off, so the top layer, and then the rest should be okay for the next however long your pep pot can last. And that's it. So your pep pot's ready. Just make sure you test the meat to make sure it's tender enough, and you can enjoy it with some bread, some cassava bread, some rice, roti, whatever you want.